Hello students, welcome to the program titled Indian Education Commission 1882. The objectives set for the present program are to know the historical background of the formation of Indian Education Commission, to know the various aims and objectives of the Commission, to know its recommendations about different aspects of education, to analyze the merits and demerits of the Commission, and finally, to understand the significance of the Commission. Let's begin with the historical background of Indian Education Commission 1882. The present system of education in India was not created in one day. It's the result of changes and modifications in the system that happened over a long period of time. The revolt of 1857 shook the very foundation of British Empire in India, and the administration was taken away from the East India Company. After the transfer of administrative powers from the company, it was considered necessary to assess the development of education and to remove the defects which have crept into it. When Lord Ripon was appointed the Viceroy, Governor General of India in 1880, a deputation of the General Council of Education requested him to inquire about Indian education. Immediately, he appointed the first Indian Education Commission on February 3, 1882, under the chairmanship of Sir William Wilson Hunter, a member of the Executive Council of the Viceroy, presided over by Sir William Wilson Hunter, a Bengal civilian. The commission was popularly known as Hunter Commission, after the name of its chairman. The commission consisted of 20 other members to report on the present scenario of system of education. The Director of Education, Mysore, B.L. Rice, was appointed as the Secretary of the Commission. It included Ananda Mohan Bose, Budev Mukhopadhyay, Maharaja Jitendra Mohan Tagore, Kashinath Timbak Tilang, and Said Ahmad Khan, who later withdrew in favor of his son Said Muhammad. The Hunter Commission was required to report on the manner in which effect had been given to the principles of the dispatch of 1854 and on the present state of elementary education and the means by which this can be extended and improved. It's a landmark in the history of education in India. It was first Education Commission which gave wide and comprehensive recommendations on the same in the history of modern India. Appointed by the Government of India, it was to review in depth the state of education since Wood's Education Dispatch of 1854. Though the development of primary education was one of the main objects contemplated by the dispatch 1854, yet owing to the variety of circumstances, expected result could not be achieved in the field of primary education. It was due to slow progress of primary education from 1854 to 1882 that the government desired that the Commission should specially bear in mind the great importance which is attaches to the subject of primary education and the means by which this can be extended and improved. Secondly, Christian missionaries had made complaints against the Indian Education Administration on the ground that education in India was not in line with Wood's dispatch. In the third place, the Country Council Act of 1880 for reforming primary education had been passed in England, and education in India was to reform on similar lines. Besides, the Commission was also required to suggest ways and means by which the system of grant and aid could be extended. It was felt that the grant and aid system, as suggested by Wood's dispatch, was not properly carried out. Lastly, there were other issues like evaluation of the success of government schools and the policy of the government with regard to the private enterprise, etc., that needed the attention of the government. The chairman, Hunter, was instructed that the motto of the commission was to reorganize the Indian educational system in such a way that the different branches of public education could move forward together with equal importance. With this conviction, the higher education is equally necessary for balanced progress of a community. It made worthwhile recommendations regarding secondary education as well. The Commission, however, recommended that while primary education should be provided without regard to the availability of local support, the Hunter Commission visited all the provinces of the then India and made a thorough inquiry in order to extend and improve the state of education. The Commission surveyed the problems for 10 months, submitted its report in March 1883. Based on the findings of its inquiry, the Commission made valuable recommendations to improve the conditions of primary and secondary education in India. The report ran into 60 pages and in all contained 220 proposals with 36 and 23 recommendations regarding primary education and secondary education respectively. The Government of India approved of nearly all the recommendations of the Commission. Now, we will discuss the objectives of the Commission. First objective of the Commission was to inquire into the execution of the Wood's dispatch of 1854 and suggest ways to improve outcomes of the same. Next, to assess the position of primary education and to give suggestions for its reform. Third, to evaluate the work of the missionaries in the field of education. Fourth, to assess the utility of grant and aid system. Next, the Commission also undertook an inquiry into the conditions of secondary education and to suggest measures for its improvement. Next, to find out the attitude of the government towards the private Indian enterprises in the field of education, to find out if they received encouragement from the government. Besides these, the female education, the Muslim education, religious education, education of aboriginals, and adult education were equally emphasized by the Commission. Now let me highlight main recommendations of the Indian Education Commission, that's Hunter Commission 1882. The Hunter Commission brought about the neglected part of education to the forefront. It produced a report of about 700 pages after hard labor. Let's have a look at its recommendations. Primary education in India. The Hunter Commission devoted its main attention to primary education and made valuable recommendations on the lines of Country Council Act of England. The Commission found that the primary education in the British Indian territories is lagging behind, and some parts of its provincial revenues must be reserved for financing the development of primary education. The Commission boldly acknowledged the importance of primary education by declaring that while every branch of education can firstly claim the fostering care of the state, the elementary education of masses, its provision, extension, and improvement deserves the greatest attention in any national system of education. It then made some important recommendations regarding its aspects like policy, administration, encouragement of indigenous schools, curriculum, training of teachers, and finance. The recommendations can be discussed under 6 headings. First, we will take policy. Regarding the policy of the government towards the primary education, the Commission recommended that, first, while every branch of education can justly claim the fostering care of the state, it's desirable in the present circumstances to declare primary education of the masses, its provision, extension, and improvement to be the vital part of the education system. To make that happen, state must take serious steps. Second, it should be closely related to the practical aspects of the life of the masses, that is, to train the people for self-dependence. Third, primary education in backward districts, especially in those areas inhabited by aboriginal races, should be extended by the Department of Education through liberal grant and aid. Fourth, in selecting persons to fill the lowest offices under government, preference being always given to candidates who can read and write. Second is administration and legislation. Regarding administration and legislation, the Commission recommended that, first, entrusting the district and municipal boards with the work of the management of primary education. These boards were entrusted with the supervision of primary education as a result of the Local Self-Government Act. These local boards should deal with the whole system of the primary education as regard to finance, management, expansion, and inspection of the primary education of a particular local area. Second, attempts should be made by legislation to secure the fullest possible provision for primary education. Next, regarding school administration, the Commission suggested that the upper and lower primary examinations should be made compulsory and care should be given not to interfere with the freedom of the managers of aided schools in the choice of textbooks. Next, utmost elasticity should be permitted with regard to the hours of the day and the seasons of the year during which the school are to function. Next, instruction in primary schools should be simplified. Practical subjects like native methods of arithmetic, accounts and mensuration, elements of natural and physical sciences, agriculture and health should be introduced suiting to their needs of practical utility. The Commission emphasized the promotion of physical development of the pupils by the encouragement of the native games, special care for the discipline, manners, and the character of the children. Next, Indians should be appointed in large numbers on the posts of inspectors. Night schools should be established wherever necessary. Third, encouragement of indigenous schools. The Commission defined the indigenous schools, quote, as one established or conducted by natives of India on native methods, unquote, and recommended that the indigenous schools should be developed, patronized, and admitted into new educational pattern. Regarding encouragement of indigenous schools, the Commission recommended that first, indigenous schools need encouragement for their improvement and incorporation into the official system of education. So, efforts should be made to encourage these schools by adopting a policy. Second, the Commission held the view that the districts and municipal boards consisting of Indians would be more sympathetic to the indigenous schools than the education department and recommended that the work of assisting indigenous schools should be assigned to them. Next, admission to such institutions should be free for all and poor students should receive stipends and scholarships. Fourth, indigenous schools imparting secular education should be recognized and encouraged. Next, special encouragement should be afforded to the indigenous school masters to undergo training and to bring their relative and probable successors under regular training. Sixth, night schools should be started wherever practicable. The next heading is training of teachers. The Commission recommended that teachers' training is essential and important to raise the standard of education. Thus, there should be every possible step to train the teachers. Regarding it, the Commission recommended, first, to raise the standard of primary education. The Commission suggested the establishment of normal schools under a divisional inspector for the training of teachers. Second, training schools should be built at such places where trained teachers may be made available for the area where there is no trained teacher. But there should be at least one normal school in each division. Also, the cost of direction, inspection, and provision of normal schools should be met from the provincial funds. Next, finance. Regarding finance, the Commission recommended that a specific fund should be created for primary education by district and municipal boards, and the Commission gave positive direction that the local funds should be utilized exclusively on primary education. Moreover, the cost of maintaining, aiding, and repairing of primary schools should be met from these funds. Second, it should be the duty of the government to assist the local funds by a suitable system of grant and aid, preferably at the rate of half of the local assets or 1/3 of the total expenditure. Next, every district and municipal board should maintain a separate fund for primary education. That is, the accounts of the primary education fund in municipal areas should be separated from those of the rural areas in order to avoid the misappropriation by urban primary schools. Besides local funds, the provincial governments should contribute to the local funds to support the primary education. The provincial government should grant 1/3 of the total expenditure to the local bodies. Now, recommendation regarding secondary education. Although the Hunter Commission recognized primary education as the prime concern of the state, it also made important recommendations on secondary education. The recommendations are: first, the Commission recommended that the expansion and the spread of secondary education, the government, through the system of grant and aid, should adopt a policy of gradual withdrawal from direct enterprise, leaving the organization and administration of that branch of education into the hands of efficient and able Indians, and get itself relieved of the responsibility of running secondary education. Second, secondary education should be left to private enterprises, as it's very costly for the government to maintain the secondary schools. Next, government should maintain some secondary schools, at least one model high school in such districts where they may be required into interests of the people, or where the people themselves may not be advanced or wealthy enough to establish such schools for themselves with a grant and aid. Next, the fees charged in aided secondary schools should be considerably lower than the fees charged in the government schools. Also, secondary school teachers should be trained in the method of teaching. In order to improve the conditions of secondary school and also vocational education, the Commission recommended that there should be diversification of courses. The first course should prepare the students for entrance examinations of the universities, and the other one of the practical character, intended to fit youth for commercial or non-literary pursuits in the upper classes of high school. For improving the standards of teaching, the Commission stressed educate examination, inspection, and proper training of teachers, and urged that successful examinees should be employed permanently as teachers in a secondary school, aided or government. Now, the recommendations regarding college education. Though the Commission was not authorized by the government to inquire into the general working of Indian universities, yet it made some minor recommendations about college education. The Commission recommended that college education should be entirely under the supervision of the universities, but should receive grant and aid. Varied and vast curricula should be arranged in the colleges so that the students may be offered subjects of their choice and aptitude. The number of students receiving free education should be limited. There should be the provision of scholarships and other studentships for meritorious and promising students to continue their studies in India as well as abroad. In appointment of teachers, preference should be given to those persons who have received their education in European universities. The system of grant and aid. In the sphere of grant and aid, the Commission examined all the prevailing system, that is, salary grant system of Madras, the payment by result system of Bombay, and the fixed period system of northern and central India. In this connection, the Commission allowed full discretion to all the provinces consistent with their local needs. The recommendations are: since the schools had different requirements and circumstances, it was not proper to have one rigid principle applicable to all, and As such, the rules should be modified, and while sanctioning grants, the needs and the circumstances of the schools should be taken into account. The cooperation of non-government bodies was necessary in the work of modification of the rules. The principles of grant and aid for the construction of the building, libraries, reading rooms, laboratories, and furnishing, etc., should be formulated, and it should also be settled as to how long would they operate. Great attention should be paid to the schools in backward areas. The schools having little capital with them should be given bigger grants. The aided schools should be given special grants for the teaching of some particular subjects. The modified rules pertaining to the grant and aid should be translated into Hindi, and copies should be sent to the management of aided schools. These copies should also be sent to all those who are in any way connected with education. This should also be published in the papers for the information of the public. Government stipends, scholarships, and awards should be equally distributed among all the schools and not only among the government institutions. The students of non-government schools also should be permitted to participate in the competitive tests for the award of stipends and scholarships and certificates. Recommendation regarding women education. The Commission brought about inadequate facilities available to the female education in the country. It suggested to make provisions for the liberal grants for girls' schools, award grants to women teachers, facilities in appointment, differentiation of curriculum, and organize a separate inspectorate for the guidance of girls' education, etc. Also, there should be the availability of normal schools for women. The suggestions with regard to the women education are like education in special subject. The Commission said that the curriculum for girls should be different from that of boys because of the different nature of their life duties. It thought that the literary subjects would not be useful for them. Instead, they should be given education in practical subjects useful in their life. Education by local boards. The Commission recommended that the local boards should be made responsible for women education in the absence of a local board in some areas. The government should shoulder the responsibility for women education. Third, women teachers. The Commission recommended that only lady teachers should be appointed in girls' schools. Fourth, inspectors. The Commission recommended that the inspectors for girls' school should be appointed. This policy would encourage women education also. Education of Harijans and backward classes, Aboriginals and hill tribes. In regard to the education of Harijans and backward classes, the recommendations were put forward. Number 1, all the schools run by government, municipalities and local boards should be directed to admit children of Harijans and backward classes. Second, in places where an objection is raised to the admission of these Harijans and backward children, special schools should be opened for them. Third, it was made recommendatory on the part of school teachers and inspectors to make judicious effects to remove caste prejudices. In regard to the education of Aboriginal and hill tribes, Commission made recommendations like children of these tribes were not be charged any fee. It was also recommended that subjects taught should be of the most elementary character. Now, about religious education. The Commission was also required to give its opinion regarding the policy the government should adopt for religious education. The Commission recommended, first, the government should have no hand in schools regarding religious education. While giving grants, special attention should be paid to the standards of the schools which give religious education. Next, moral and physical education. The Commission emphasized that although there has to be exclusion of the religious education, there should be some sort of arrangement to give sense of right and wrong to students, and for this purpose, the textbooks on moral education should be prepared. In the government-aided schools, the principal or the professor should deliver a series of lectures on duties of the man and citizen. The Commission also gave due weightage to physical education in its recommendations. Now we will discuss merits of the Commission. The Commission made recommendations on almost all the aspects of Indian education. It made primary education practical and useful by including in its curriculum subjects like agriculture, medicine, trigonometry, arithmetic, and accounts. The recommendations made by the Commission in the field of female education, education of Muslims, adult education, education of Harijans, backward classes, aboriginals, and hill tribes proved of great value and significance. The recommendations of the Commission with regard to the grant and aid system went a great way in improving and regularizing the system. It provided encouragement to indigenous system of education. It laid down the policy regarding the role of missionaries. It recommended diversification of courses at the secondary stage. Now moving to the demerits of the Commission. The Commission shifted the responsibility of primary education from the state to the local bodies improperly. But these interested organizations and institutions were not reasonably and financially sound. The recommendation that private institutions should charge lower fees than the government institutions was not only unfair, but it also created unhealthy competition in education. The recommendations of establishing separate Muslim schools for primary education encouraged communalism. The Commission continued English as the medium of instruction at the secondary level, but did a bit to specify the medium at middle level. This policy increased the indifferences to Indian languages. Not much and worthwhile attention was given to training institutions by the Commission. The Commission did not give any serious thought to the curriculum of higher education. Recommendations on religious education were not realistic. Expansion of higher education resulted in dilution of standards. Now we will discuss the significance of Hunter Commission. The Hunter Commission constitutes an important and valuable stage in the history of education. It was a landmark move initiated by Viceroy Lord Ripon with objectives to look into the complaints in the British territories and suggest means by which this can be extended and improved. In the first half of 19th century, political unrest grew up owing to the controversies about the educational policies of the government in India. The official report was that the educational expansion were not carried on in the proper way and admitted the lowering standards of education. So, the Commission infused in the education of the country a new life by means of its significant recommendations. It considered several aspects of education and kept in its view the good of the people of the country. One of the principal impacts was the massive participation of Indian philanthropists in the system of education. India witnessed a rapid and unprecedented growth in the field of primary and secondary education in the past 20 years. With the devolution of the control to the local bodies, the bridge element in the teaching and inspecting the departments was considerably reduced. This measure made them free of any responsibilities for the same and gave an opportunity to the local boards to serve the people. Luckily, the local boards performed their task well, and conditions of primary education schools changed considerably. Thus, the local boards played the most vital role in the development of primary education in India. At the time of Hunter Commission, there were many indigenous institutions. These schools were teaching education to the people on all traditional Indian patterns. The Commission encouraged that these schools were very useful for imparting education. Apart from the study of Western literatures, Indian and the Oriental literatures were also given special emphasis. It encouraged private enterprises in the field of secondary education. Moreover, the Education Commission drew attention to the inadequate facilities for the female education outside the presidency towns and also made recommendations for its separate. To conclude, Indian Education Commission, popularly famous as Hunter Commission, was a landmark appointed by Viceroy Lord Ripon on the 3rd February 1882. Objectives were to look into the complaints of the non-implementation of Wood's Dispatch of 1854, the contemporary status of elementary education in the British territories, and suggest means by which this can be extended and improved. It was entrusted with the responsibility to review the entire state of education in India and to recommend necessary measures for further progress. However, the principal object was to inquire the state of elementary or primary education in India. The Commission suggested that the elementary schools should be handed over to the management of municipal councils. The Commission declared English as the medium of instruction at secondary stage and divided the high school courses into two parts. It laid great stress on the training of teachers. The Commission also dealt with the problem of moral upliftment of students and recommended adopting of different curricula by the colleges. The position of missionaries was also made clear. The Commission's recommendations, though relieved the government of the burden and placed the Indian education in the hands of the country, yet it contained certain things that were quite unwholesome for the Indian community. Most of its recommendations were accepted by the British government, but sadly the government did not show any interest in their implementation. This is all for today. Hope you have enjoyed and understood. Thank you for watching.